What's up, everybody? Welcome back into an episode of The Lawyer You Know. And today we're going to be talking about Kelly Devers' resignation. That happened at a very interesting time. It was reported even further back, closer to the trial. And then there was some mixed reports. Well, eventually now everything has been confirmed. She has resigned. Why? What's the timing like? Is this common? Do things like this happen? I'm going to bring my dad on this episode to talk about his thoughts on it. We're going to react to Alan Jackson's thoughts on it. We're going to talk about, has this ever happened in our practice? Why do things like this happen from a prosecution side, from a defense side? All that and more on today's episode. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Let's get into it. All right, Dad, welcome back on here. We're going to start by reading the announcement from Ted Daniel that breaking Boston police tell me Officer Kelly Dever, who testified in Karen Reed's trial, has resigned. On today's date, September 12th, 2025, a personnel order was released stating the resignation of police officer Kelly Dever, ID number 173471, assigned to BAT leave of absence, section org number 36135, after being presented, is hereby effective September 1st, 2025. So Kelly Dever is out. Were you surprised to hear that?
No, I really wasn't. That's what should happen, frankly, because her effectiveness is over. There's nothing that they can do. I mean, and it does happen. There are some jobs they could probably give her, and those jobs would be jobs that don't entail testifying or doing anything under oath. But as far as being an effective patrol officer or a detective or anything like that, it's over for her. And so
Yeah,
it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it was either going to be this or reassignment, right? Just like you said, it's either going to be resignation or reassignment because she got smoked on the stand as far as her credibility goes. And the way that she testified, what she said, right, creating a false memory, and talking to the police commissioner and then hearing what the police commissioner said about it afterwards was all just a complete mess and something that is so hard to come back from that I would have been surprised, frankly, if she was ever in a position to where she might be testifying as a law enforcement officer ever again. And just to remind people what the commissioner said about his interaction with Kelly Dever, which she said was absolutely about Karen Reed in this trial. And he said, quote unquote, do the right thing, which why would you ever need to be told to do the right thing? But many people thought she was testifying like this to save her job and back the blue. And she was going to say whatever she needed to say that was best for law enforcement because that's where she worked and that's where she wanted to continue to work after the trial. And now it's all kind of exploded, but let's just listen to a quick 1-minute video of what the commissioner said about it, just to give us some context of what all happened after the trial, but before she resigned. This is how it was being portrayed.
Your name came up during the recent Karen Reed trial. You got a visit from Officer Kelly Dever. The defense implied that you influenced your testimony. Do you want to respond to that?
I have nothing to do with Karen Reed. Matter of fact, I didn't even know this person was associated with the Karen Reed case. I have an organization filled with over 3,000 people, and we support all our folks. And the reality is that, I get information passed on, whether people are high or low, and I encourage everyone, right? And if you're going to work here and you belong here, then we're going to encourage you. I have no idea what they're talking about with Karen Reed. It had nothing to do with Karen Reed. No discussion.
Did you tell Officer Dever to do the right thing?
I didn't know she was even associated with that case. So, I don't know. I was struck like, what do I have to do with the Karen Reed race? I never have said those words together. And so the fact is, it's much to do about nothing. We have employees here that we have to develop and encourage and do things, and I do that for tons of our employees.
Do you feel that you were inappropriately drawn into this as some sort of boogeyman?
That case is over, and we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about. I have nothing to do with Karen Reed. I was in the state of Michigan.
Every time I hear that, it makes me chuckle a little bit because he's like, I have nothing to do with it. That's over. I've never said those words together. So literally, Kelly Dever herself said she had conversations with him about Karen Reed, and he's basically calling her a liar. So Alan Jackson got her to call herself a liar by creating a false memory on the stand. The commissioner, her boss, who she said she talked to, is calling her a liar. So she just can't come back from this. And Karen Reed's case isn't over because it's still affecting people like Kelly Dever. What did you think in light of that comment that the commissioner made, the comments Kelly Dever made on the stand, and we can start to work in Alan Jackson's letter to add Kelly Dever to the Brady list so every lawyer that ever came in contact with her again, or every criminal defendant that ever came in contact with her again, would know, cross-examine her on this because she has no credibility?
Well, obviously what he says is inconsistent with her testimony. So, or at least the impression her testimony gave. I thought it was interesting, though, he didn't deny meeting with her. He never said he didn't meet with her. So I thought that was interesting, because if that was the case, he would have said, I never met with her. I never talked to her. He never said that. So, the fact is, he didn't deny meeting with her. He didn't deny talking to her. What he denied was talking to her about Karen Reed. So there could have been some general conversations he had with her, and then she interpreted a certain way and testified a certain way at trial, which was inconsistent with, his thoughts on the conversation he had with her. But I thought that was interesting that he danced around that question.
Right. I mean, he didn't just dance. Like, he sounded like a criminal defendant with providing his alibi. I was in Michigan. I had nothing to do with the Karen Reed case. I shouldn't be connected to the Karen Reed case, because he doesn't want to be. And Kelly Dever is the one that directly connected him. And then now he's got to be in Alan Jackson's crosshairs, right? And that's not anywhere anybody in law enforcement wants to be at this point. And so when you create all of this, and it creates a situation where Jackson writes a letter like that. Have you ever written a letter like that? I never have.
No.
Trying to pressure them into adding an officer to a Brady list or anything like that?
No, I never had. And frankly, it just shows that the defense lawyer hasn't quite left this alone. And he still is pretty emotional about the case and pretty invested in the case. Normally, as defense lawyers, we move on to the next case, because that case is over and done. We won. We've celebrated. It was a great win, and everything was great. So we move on to the next case. We don't keep on it and keep involving ourselves in it. But apparently, he's got a real emotional attachment to the case.
Well, yeah, he'll even admit he has a real emotional attachment, but it's not over. That's why he has joined her civil defense team, number one, and they're going to file, I think they're going to file a 1983 action against law enforcement in this case. And there's book deals and movie deals. And so there's so much still going on in the background.
True.
This is far from over. They're not done.
True.
They have made that as clear as possible every chance they get. And speaking of that defense attorney who wrote that letter, who is connected to this case, who has strong feelings about Kelly Dever, he was asked in an interview recently what he thought about Kelly Dever resigning. And let's take a listen here to it.
Nothing special, nothing more, nothing less. Yeah.
Other latest news, Kelly Dever. You said Dever, and you were right, because it would be two V's if it was Dever.
Right? The difference between Eddie and Edie, right?
You were right calling her.
Yeah.
You should have said, you know what, ma'am? Actually, no, that is not your last name. Your last name is Dever. But anyway, Kelly Dever, who originally stated she saw Brian Higgins and Canton Police Chief Kenneth Berkowitz suspiciously surrounding Karen's Lexus SUV in the Canton Police garage called Sallyport, then later called it a false memory under your cross. She resigned from the Boston Police Department on September 1st. She was on medical leave or family leave or whatever all summer long. What are your feelings about her today? Do you have any sort of, I don't know, sympathy for, it's kind of a sad character.
Sympathy.
Her whole life, she's so young and she's just got any? Or is she?
Zero.
No
sympathy whatsoever. She's also a grown woman. Young, I don't care. She's grown.
Certainly rude.
She was old enough to carry a gun. She was old enough to carry a badge. She was old enough to take an oath, right?
Yeah.
Those things come with consequences, right? You've got responsibilities. And look, I take no pleasure in, I'm not going to dance on her demise, but do I have sympathy for her? No, she made her bed, as the old saying goes, and she's got to lie in it. So I think it's exactly what should have happened, did happen. She should not ever carry a gun, carry a badge, be in a position of authority running herd over the community. It comes with consequences.
Alan, we're going to go to the chat section here for a second. We're live, so people are fired up to get.
All right. So that was his reaction. Zero sympathy, no sympathy at all. She's a grown woman, old enough to carry a gun, old enough to wear a badge, old enough to take an oath. Were you surprised by his comments?
I guess not, considering the trial. And we watched the trial, and I saw him during the trial. I guess not. I don't know if I would have been as strong as he was about dancing on her grave, but I'm not surprised. I mean, he was very aggressive toward her, and he should have been. Her testimony was ridiculous, and so he should have been, tough on her, and he should have had righteous indignation, which he did have. So I'm not surprised that he feels that way toward her. And the letter, if you go back to the letter didn't ask for her resignation. The letter just asked for her to be put on the Brady list. Her resignation was maybe a natural consequence of that, but he didn't ask for it.
He maybe didn't ask for it, but he knew that there was a real chance of it once you become a pariah, basically, and you can't testify and you're hands off, and there's only certain areas you can then even go and work. And especially somebody like her who didn't have a lot of experience. It's not like she had come up, done a bunch of jobs on the force before, so they could just put her back in one of those other jobs. It would probably take resources and time to move her somewhere. And when you've been on for 20 years, again, they have some loyalty to you. She didn't have that. But she did very publicly go take bullets basically for law enforcement on the stand. I mean, I think Alan Jackson had a lot to do with her resignation, with his cross-examination, him calling her at all. It wasn't a cross, I guess, technically, because they called her, but he had her on the witness list. He put her on the stand. He asked her the questions that said she created a false memory. He wrote the Brady letter. I think this is a natural consequence of his actions, something he felt was appropriate, obviously, based on what he said. And I tend to agree with him that he probably protected a lot of other citizens. If she was willing to go up there and say that on the stand, we as criminal defense lawyers now, you mostly, we don't want cops like that handling cases. We don't want cops like that willing to say whatever their boss tells them to say, as in do the right thing, if we're going to believe that even happened, because I don't know who I believe between Dever and Cox. But at this point, I don't want her working on cases, frankly, whether I'm a citizen, a private citizen, whether I'm a lawyer. I think this was the right result personally.
Well, I think it's scarier for citizens, because
Right.
you sit around, here's a police officer, and you expect them not to have false memories of when they arrest you or when they see some criminal conduct that they're accusing you of. You don't expect that to be a false memory. So as a citizen, she was really scary. Another thing to keep in mind, and just to remind everybody from the trial, she was a Canton police officer, and then recently became a Boston police officer when she transferred from Canton to Boston. So she did not have longevity really at Canton, in Boston. Also, since the trial, she was on medical leave. So she hadn't even been really doing any police work since the trial ended through her resignation. So you've got a situation where they don't have a lot of loyalty to her. They don't have a lot of history with her. So, she was an easy one to let go. Of course, she resigned. She didn't get fired, but she was an easy one to let go also. And again, I don't know if this is true. I have read that her salary was $140,000. Now, I don't know if
Not
that's
bad.
true or not. Big cities have a lot more money to pay their police officers than the small towns do. But I heard that was her salary at Boston when she left.
I have no idea. I haven't read any of that, but
I don't
it's
either.
not too bad.
I can't say that that's a fact.
Yeah, not bad for her experience level for sure. So it's really interesting because she wasn't technically fired. She resigned. Sounds like maybe asked to leave or told her there's not really a place for you here, but allow her to save face by resigning instead of getting fired. Talk a little bit about how, because you've worked at the state level and the federal level, and you've been a supervisor at those levels in charge of hiring and firing and who's going to get what job and whose responsibilities they are, and maybe reassigning some people or choosing who you're going to use and not. How hard is it to lose a government job like this, whether it's law enforcement or as a prosecutor, public defender, things like that?
Well, I assume you mean being fired as opposed to resigning. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Because it's not hard to resign. But right. Being fired, it's tough because especially, let's talk about Boston. They're all unionized. They all have union counsel. The union will pay for lawyers for them to sue the city. So you can't just willy-nilly fire somebody. you've got to have some reasons and good concrete reasons. And you have to, most of them have a situation where you have a series of steps you have to go through before you can fire somebody. Warnings, counselings, letters, those kinds of things, so that you give them a chance. So again, resigning is easy, firing and stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, when I was at the state attorney's office, somebody got fired because literally during court, during first appearances over the weekend, he got caught watching golf in court, got reprimanded, not fired. Then somebody else was caught watching inappropriate videos in court. They got fired. Like, that's the type of stuff it takes. Not even sometimes on the first try. It's like, for a lot of these situations, it's very hard to get fired. But we've also seen a bunch of officers we've seen Proctor get fired, and even he's fighting that, which just seems mind-boggling that he would even fight it. But we've seen other officers like Yuri Buchanan get reassigned and moved from one post to another. And that's another thing that happens maybe if there's some negative action or consequences within the field that supervisors are looking at, or prosecutors can have an effect on law enforcement as well. Because if you're like, I don't want to use that person ever again as an officer, or I'm not going to prosecute things that they arrest people for because I don't trust them, or they doctor their reports, or whatever. We've had things like that where officers will just make arrests and then not even do anything to follow up with those arrests. And we're like, what's happening here? We talk to their supervisor. There can be some actions happening there. Has this ever happened to us? From your experience, you can kind of explain it, because I know it's happened in one trial we did together, but I know some other cases that you've had and experiences you've had where you've had an officer terminated, resigned, or reassigned because of a trial you handled or some questioning you had with that officer.
Well, I tell you, first of all, and again, just my impression, the law enforcement agency is not necessarily really forthcoming with negatives about an officer. If you don't already know something about as a prosecutor, about the officer, they don't volunteer it. And so unless you really go and dig into this officer, you won't know about it. But whenever I had a key witness, I dug and look at his internal affairs file and those kind of things to see if there's anything in there. Otherwise, they don't volunteer it. So that's number one. Number two, one case particularly I remember is I had an FBI agent admit to me that he let a confidential informant keep some drugs as kind of payment to that confidential informant for the work that he did. Well, obviously, an FBI agent letting someone keep drugs is not a positive. And so I went to his supervisor and to the special agent in charge, and I said, hey, look, this is what happened. And I told them, and I was chief of the criminal division, our office will not prosecute any other cases that this guy brings to us. So you can do what you want with him. But as far as we're concerned, he's useless. And they didn't fire him. What they did is they transferred him, I think, to Boise. So they transferred him just to another office. Now, whether that other office put him on a Brady list for that or not, I don't know. But they transferred him. So that's one example of how the FBI would handle something like that. We've had in our trial where a judge actually issued an order that, and this is an FBI agent as well, lied on the stand. And
destroyed evidence when they weren't supposed to.
Right. So, all sorts of bad stuff. In that case, again, they came to me as I was a defense lawyer at that time. You and I were trying that case, and they said, we want the judge to remove that order. We're going to reconsider it. What's your position on reconsidering it? And what I told them was, hey, look, that's the judge's order. That's the judge's responsibility. The judge can do what the judge wants to do. I'm not supporting reconsidering what the judge did. And the judge reconsidered it and denied the government's motion. So that order stayed, and that travels with him. He didn't get fired either. In fact, I never heard from him again, so I don't know where he went, but yeah, he wasn't terminated. I had another case where evidence, the chain of evidence was important. Who handled the phone, when the phone was handled, when they extracted the document or the data from the phone. So I put on the stand and I subpoenaed the person who's in charge, the custodian of evidence at the FBI office. Custodian testified. After the custodian testified, and to the credit of the assistant U.S. attorney who prosecuted the case, they told that assistant that they'd been reprimanded for mishandling evidence and for not securing the evidence room. And they gave that to me and said, look, we're sorry, but we didn't know about this beforehand because that's the FBI didn't tell them. Can you imagine not telling the prosecutor when they put a witness on the stand that this person had mishandled evidence when the whole issue was mishandling evidence? And so that case, the prosecutors dismissed the case, frankly, because of their Brady violations, and they didn't want to deal with it. So they dismissed the case. So
And
it
just so-
happens all the time. Go ahead.
And just so everybody's clear about that, you're saying mishandling evidence in a different case. Like they had
Yes.
been reprimanded before for mishandling evidence, not admitting they mishandled evidence in this case, but still this case was the one that got dismissed because the prosecutor did the right thing because it was a Brady violation. You should have been able to cross-examine them on it. It would have been a big topic at trial that they mishandled evidence in the other case. So it's more likely, or they'd be okay, or it was evidence mishandled in this case. That argument would have been a big part of it. That's how it should work, right? Just kind of as a side thing of how good prosecutors handle cases. When something like that explodes in your face and you didn't mean to do it and it had nothing to do with you necessarily, you still do the right thing. You dismiss the case because the rules are important. Regardless of if that prosecutor thinks our client is guilty or not, you do the right thing. And that just so often did not happen in Karen Reed's case. Instead, they continue to ignore it, cover it up, not turn it over and over and over again. And the judge, right? If we're comparing the judge now to, I think multiple cases you were discussing there had the same judge whom we really like. She's not necessarily like our best friend or does everything we want, but she does the right thing. We've lost trials in front of her before too, where she thought she was incredibly fair, way fairer to our client than we even expected in one trial I can think of. And we lost that trial, but she was great. And then the other trial where she literally reprimanded the FBI agent on the record, which, like you said, can follow him everywhere. We don't even know where he is now. In that case, she forced the dismissal of that. So that was a win, technically, in that scenario. So judges that do the right thing and are fair, prosecutors that do the right thing and are fair, law enforcement, state and federal, that do the right thing and are fair is the backbone of our country. Criminal defense lawyers, we are there to hold them to account, to make sure they're doing it right. And if they don't, you do what we did, what Alan Jackson did, what good criminal defense attorneys do. You hold their feet to the fire. You ask the hard questions. You force the transparency. You force them to understand the rules. And when you break the rules, there are consequences. Because if there are no consequences to breaking the rules, they will continue to break the rules over and over again to the detriment of the citizens of the society that we live in. So throughout this process, all of those pieces, criminal defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges, and law enforcement, are incredibly important. So when you see something like this, a law enforcement officer resign, maybe as a connection to this trial, I guess we don't necessarily know that it had a connection to this trial. This is actually a consequence to negative action that affected a citizen of the United States, Karen Reed.
It's very rare for a case to get dismissed for a Brady violation. And it's also very rare for an appellate court to reverse a conviction for a Brady violation, unless, again, this is just this catch-22 defense lawyers have, unless the defense lawyer files some motion specifically related to the Brady violation. But if we don't know about the Brady violation, how do you file a motion requesting the Brady information? That's the kind of trouble. That's why you have to rely on honest prosecutors, because defense lawyers, how would I know about internal investigations into the fact that this person mishandled evidence? I wouldn't know about that without an honest prosecutor talking about it. So, it's so rare, but again, good prosecutors really make a difference. And like I told you, law enforcement doesn't voluntarily come before you. And another thing, we talk about this Brady list or the Brady database that they talk about. That is not an old list. That's not something that's been around for 50 years. That's a recent innovation that they create this Brady database. It used to be you didn't have anywhere to go to take a look for past Brady issues, but they've recently established this in all sorts of jurisdictions so that defense lawyers now have a place to go in order for them to take a look at the Brady information, and prosecutors are on notice about somebody having a Brady problem, and therefore they have to disclose it. And if they don't, it's going to be an easier appellate issue now than it used to be.
Yeah, we used to have to wait for them to send us a letter that said, okay, this officer had a DUI in 2012 and this officer, didn't pay his child support or whatever. Like, they used to have to send us individual things like that, which bad prosecutors, if they don't want to send it, don't, but also lazy prosecutors may just forget or didn't look into it or didn't have it, and it would still be at the detriment of the defendant and our client, and it would hurt them. So the process of making this easier and putting the onus on them to give us, it's like proving a negative. We can't as defense lawyers without that information.
Right. So again, you're blind, and in federal prosecution especially, you are blind because you can't do depositions in federal case. A lot of people don't realize that you can't question the witnesses beforehand. If they don't want to talk to you, they don't have to talk to you. So, and law enforcement never talks to you in a federal case. So you can't question them. You can't say things like before the trial. You can't ask them, "Have you ever been arrested? Did you ever mishandle evidence? Did you ever lie on the witness?" You can't ask them questions like that before they take the stand at the trial. And at the trial, you don't want to ask them questions like that because it'll build their credibility if they answer questions like, "Have you ever, lied on the stand?" Of course, they're going to say, "Oh no, I've never lied on the stand." So you don't have the ability beforehand to question these witnesses. That's why they call it trial by ambush in federal court. Now, in Boston, did they have depositions? I don't think they did. They have. I don't think they had. Did they have?
I was just going to say, in some state courts, you can't do that either. And no, they weren't allowed to depose these people. All they had were the police interviews, which is again similar to federal court. But as we saw in Karen Reed's case, those police interviews are not always correct, and witnesses sometimes don't agree that what the cop wrote in the interview, if it's not a recorded interview, and then that's all you're left with, as opposed to a deposition where every word is typed out under oath.
And the FBI traditionally does not tape record their interviews. And in my opinion, for exactly that reason, they don't tape record the interviews because this way the agent can write down how he interprets what that person says. And they'll tell you if it's not in quotes, it's not the exact, what they said. It's the officer's interpretation of what they said. And with regards to this officer, when she testified, all that Jackson had was the FBI interview. And that FBI interview was totally opposite of her testimony on the stand. And again, she explained it in a ridiculous way, how she explained, how that happened. But that's all he had. And the fact that you cannot rely on that FBI interview is a real problem for a defense lawyer because you do rely on it and you don't think witnesses are going to take a 180-degree turn on the stand. So.
Yeah. No, I think that's, it's just an interesting process to see about how all of that works through these cases. But at the end of the day, she has resigned, which we think is the right thing based on the series of events that happened, and people don't have to, be afraid of her creating more false memories in their cases or being on the stand. But we'll continue to follow this Karen Reed saga. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about her, or did we hit all the points you want to get to?
No, I think so. And I think we also said a bunch of things about her during the course of the trial while we were watching her testimony. That, really, our impressions, and I think the impressions of the jury and everybody else about her testimony, I think I said it during the thing. It was the most outrageous thing I probably have ever seen, is the fact that she would get up there and testify about a false memory. I've never seen anything like it. So
I think it's a good video for law enforcement across the country to clip and use when they talk about teaching officers how to testify, what they need to do, what they don't need to do. And for lawyers who a lot of times go in and help law enforcement agents, and prosecutors will tell them, like, this is what the trial's like. This is what it's going to be like. This is what cross is going to be like. And this could be a great teaching moment for law enforcement officers across the country. So I appreciate you joining me today, Dad. I hope everybody has an amazing weekend. Make sure you all hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already. Monday's podcast is not one you're going to want to miss. Alan Jackson did a very long interview, and I have some big disagreements with him throughout. So make sure you check that out and let me know what you think. But for now, that's all we got. Till next time, we're out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out The Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. And if you have a case that you want to personally talk to us about in your life, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, truck accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.